I want to give you a man history moment. We got to bring back, or point the way back for the men, back to the father. And Sean is going to read this for you and tell you about this guy. Good morning, Sean. Oh. My producer is here. He white. And because August is Men's History Month, we got to set aside a little time to bring back the natural order of men. All right? And women. And the women will follow if the men were men. So there's this man by the name of, or was, Ernest Hemingway. Tell us about him.
Well,
This is from our Ernest Hemingway
excuse me.
biography. Ernest Hemingway left behind an impressive body of work and an iconic style that still influences writers today. Right?
That's right.
Well, should I play the biography first and then you follow?
Sure.
Okay. Here's from biography.
Ernest Hemingway was one of the most important writers of the 20th century.
He revolutionized the idea of what an American author was.
As a young man, Hemingway worked on his school newspaper, and then on graduation, instead of going to college, he went directly to work on newspapers in Kansas City. That background in journalism had a lot to do with his later literary style.
Ernest Hemingway's writing style was significant because he was so brief and seemingly straightforward. Whereas other writers were writing very long sentences, Hemingway came in and stamped on them with his short little sentences.
During World War I, Hemingway served as an ambulance driver and then moved to Paris, where he wrote his first novel, The Sun Also Rises. Hemingway's 1929 second novel, A Farewell to Arms, was based on his World War I experiences and was a big success. His personal life, however, was often stormy.
Hemingway had this pathological thing where as soon as he married one woman, he fell in love with another one, usually a much younger one. And this happened over and over.
Ernest Hemingway was married 4 times. With his first wife, Hadley, they had a son, John. With his second wife, Pauline, he had 2 sons, Patrick and Gregory. He was then married to the journalist Martha Gellhorn, and then finally to Mary Welsh.
Hemingway continued to live up to his reputation as a fearless physical writer, as he served as a newspaper war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War and World War II.
In 1951, Ernest Hemingway won the Pulitzer Prize for The Old Man and the Sea.
Hemingway was further honored 3 years later with a Nobel Prize in Literature.
Hemingway suffered from alcoholism, suffered from an ongoing battle with inner demons in his life.
It started to take an intense mental toll. He would have beer and gin for breakfast. And after a while, he was no longer a functional alcoholic. His ability to write was gone, and he felt that that was his essence as a human being. That was his point for being on Earth.
Hemingway committed suicide when finally he found that all the virtues that he most valued, self-control and productivity, had come to an end. It was better to go out than simply to flounder on.
Ernest Hemingway died on July 2nd, 1961.
Hemingway's greatest work may have been his life, the life that he lived. He took being a writer from being someone who just sat in a room to someone who not just gobbled up life, but made a show of it.
Amazing. That's an amazing story. And you say?
There's really so much to say. There's so much to say. You can't really talk about men's history without talking about him, especially American men's history. He was like the most well-known writer of the 20th century. And he really he was very influential in defining what manhood meant for a lot of people, especially like the myth about him,
right,
as opposed to like his actual
right
life. Because, everyone tell stories about themselves that aren't necessarily all that true.
Yeah.
But his actual life was pretty incredible. He was born in 1899 in Illinois. His dad was a doctor, like a town doctor. And his mom was, she gave up her career as an opera singer to have children.
Nice.
And his mom was very overpowering and selfish, sort of bombastic and imposing, impatient, all those things. He had a older sister that was 2 years older, and she used to dress them both up as girls.
She would dress him like that too?
Yeah.
What the?
She would have them wear the same clothes.
No wonder he committed suicide.
Well, his dad committed suicide in the same way, too.
Really?
Yep.
What the?
But he grew up worshiping his dad. His dad taught him everything about hunting, and his dad was a very respected professional guy.
Right.
And he grew up worshiping his dad. His dad taught him everything about the outdoors, hunting, how to be a man. But as he grew older, he started to see his dad as like weak and submissive to his mom. And that probably had a, profound effect.
So his
on
father
him.
committed suicide?
Yep. He shot himself, and so did Ernest Hemingway.
That's amazing. It's interesting that outwardly he was smart intellectually to do the things he did, but inwardly he had so much conflict.
Yeah, he did, and it was all the things we talk about. His overpowering mother. He called his mom an all-time all-American bitch.
He did? All-time all-American bitch?
Yep.
Really?
Direct quote.
Wow.
And his mom wrote him, when he was like 18, 19, 20, his mom wrote him a letter and said, like, if you don't start acting like a man, and if you don't come out of your head, you're not welcome in this house anymore. You can't come home anymore. And so he went to World War I. He wasn't a soldier. He was an ambulance driver. Ambulance.
That's what he did.
Serviceman. Yeah.
Right.
He couldn't because he was like nearsighted or something like that. He got rejected.
Right.
So he became an ambulance driver, but he got severely wounded as an ambulance driver in the war. And then he spent all that time in Paris. But his writing style is really what stands out. Like it influenced so many. It was such a big influence that it's hard to like describe what it was like.
Right.
But it was the best ever. I mean, it redefined what writing was like for people.
They said that he wrote short phrases where the other people try to write these long, thick stories.
Yeah, exactly. It was very simple, declarative, short sentences, short paragraphs, like you would see in a newspaper.
Right.
Not a lot of adjectives, not a lot of big words. It was very accessible to common people. And if you had a high school degree, you could understand what he was writing. It wasn't
Keep it simple.
It wasn't elitist, highfalutin like college language.
Tried to show off to get the glory.
Yeah, it was writing for everyone.
Yeah.
It really was, which made it even. Not only was it his style for everyone, but it was also really deep. So they call it the iceberg theory. Mm-hmm. So what you see on the page is only an eighth of the iceberg. 7/8 of the iceberg are under the water. Like the writing was simple, but by subtle associations, and if you really looked into it and like brought something to the reading, it's actually very, very, very deep.
Nice.
So it hit everybody, whether you're a scholar or a regular guy. It was profound.
Yeah, they say he went to college or he dropped out. He went to college.
No, he didn't go to college.
He didn't go to college.
No.
Oh, nice.
No, he went to work on the newspaper.
Oh.
And then all of his friends started volunteering for World War I, and he did as well. His parents didn't. His parents wanted him to go to college, and then going to work for the newspaper in Kansas City was like a compromise with his parents. Like, oh, I won't go to college, but I'll go to work instead of going to the war. But he ended up going to the war anyway.
Yeah, it reminded me. I was talking to a young lady yesterday, and she was telling me that one of her brothers was I believe she said sheep farmer, like simple life. And he did very, very well working the fields and doing his thing. And then the other brother went to college to be an intellectual or something like that. And the brother that was his sheep farmer did better than the brother that went to college. And And the brother that went to college is still going to college. He's an old guy. He's not even satisfied yet. He's just trying to get degree after degree.
Yeah.
What a mess.
Not surprising.
Amazing.
But yeah, writing wasn't the only thing he did. He was a deep sea fisherman. He was a boxer. He was a bullfighting aficionado. He was a big game hunter in Africa. He did it. He traveled the world and did it all.
Amazing.
And like met all of the famous people.
I didn't realize he died in the 60s. I thought he had died earlier in life. Like,
Yeah,
What are they
60,
again?
61, 62, something like that.
so what is it? Are his sons doing it? His kids are still alive, I assume.
I think one or two of them are.
And are they doing anything, following in his footsteps?
Not that I know of.
Uh.
Not that I know of. I don't think they're particularly well known.
Did you know he had been married so many times?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
And
His first girlfriend, he fell in love while he was in the hospital. While he was after he got injured in the war, he was in the hospital and he fell in love with a woman who was like 7 years older than him, a nurse. That wasn't the first person he got married to.
right, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It was just the person he fell in love with.
When she broke up with him, he was like devastated, and then he ended up marrying like four different people
Come on, man!
throughout his life.
Wow.
And he, like you say, he always had one waiting in the wings before he
Yeah.
broke up with the first one.
Yeah, I used to do that. That's amazing.
But yeah, so I have a couple things to read, if that's all right. Well, first of all, I want to say he's one of those people who are getting canceled now. He's one of those people who are dead, but they're getting canceled.
Really?
Yeah.
And why?
Because because he's a white male, to be honest. But his writing is, he talks about a lot of heavy stuff in his writing, not heavier than anyone else,
Right.
But now these publishers, the Daily Wire, I saw in the article, they put trigger warnings on his books now.
Wow.
So before you get into reading the book, it's a trigger warning saying that the publication of the novel is not an endorsement of his writings. And it says this book was published in 1926, reflects the attitudes of its time. The publisher's decision to present it as it was originally published is not intended as an endorsement of cultural representations of or language contained herein. And you might have heard of The Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah, I heard that.
Right,
Yes.
that's one of his
Wow.
his last one.
So what is it? What was about the book they don't like?
If you can believe this, The Old Man in the Sea is flagged for allegedly graphic fishing scenes.
Fishing?
Graphic fishing scenes.
How can fishing be graphic?
You're harming the poor animal.
What the?
I mean, I don't know. It's just a way to make his writing more obscure.
Yeah.
But if you want a good example of his style, he wrote novels, he wrote short stories, he wrote nonfiction, he wrote a little bit of poetry that wasn't very good. But this is from Big Two-Hearted River, one of his short stories. And he used the same character over and over again. His name was Nick Adams, and it was very representative of him as a young man.
Right.
But he wrote, Nick looked at the burnt-over stretch of hillside where he had expected to find the scattered houses of the town, and then walked down to the railroad track to the bridge over the river. The river was there. It swirled against the log spires of the bridge. Nick looked down into the clear brown water, colored from the pebbly bottom, and watched the trout keeping themselves steady in the current with wavering fins. As he watched them, they changed their position by quick angles, only to hold steady in the fast water again. Nick watched them for a long time.
Nice.
His style,
Yeah,
no adjectives.
Right. I like that.
If you can picture, like, the first people, like when we were hunters and gatherers, just, the first men who went out hunting in small little groups.
Right.
Let's just say, for the sake of conversation, before we started using language, really, there wouldn't be a lot of spoken words. There'd be like the leader of the hunting group, and a lot of that language would be nonverbal. You know, tiny little sounds, hand movements, mostly just his body language that everybody would respond to, and everybody just knew what was going on. And that's a way of communicating that's faster and more accurate and articulate than any words could ever be, you know? And then people, let's just say, you know, people started using nouns first. You know, this is a chair, this is a rock, this is a axe, you know?
Right.
And that's also pretty direct. Everyone knows an axe when they see it. Everyone knows a chair when they see it. And then let's just say people started using verbs next, you know, run, jump, hide, you know. Now verbs can, more than nouns, verbs start to get a little confusing, you know. Let's just say dedicate, you know, everyone might think of dedication as something different, you know.
Interesting.
But as soon as you start using adjectives, things start to get confusing. It's immediately, as soon as you start using adjectives, it's like a judgment. You know, you're putting a judgment on the world.
Yeah.
When I was learning about Ernest Hemingway, I had a professor that said, adjectives ruined the English language. He said that.
Whoa.
I don't know if he was talking about him specifically, but he said adjectives ruined the English language.
Yeah.
I never really knew what he meant by that.
Yeah.
But it like stirred up in my mind for years and years, and then just recently I started thinking about it. Like, yeah, he's right. Adjectives ruin the English language, and Hemingway doesn't use a lot of adjectives. Trump doesn't use a lot of adjectives.
Right.
Very simple, direct language.
The
Verbs,
good old days.
verbs, nouns, and it's all the meaning of it is implied by what's repeated.
Yeah. Is it safe to say that Hake abuses adjectives?
Oh, he uses them in the funniest way possible. Yeah, he uses them very tongue in cheek kind of way. So he gets it.
Amazing. That's interesting, man. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, right. And so the meaning in these novels and the meaning in his stories are all implied. You know, he uses something called objective correlative, and there's an object in the scene of the novel, and you get to know the characters by how they treat this object.
No.
So they all treat the object differently,
Yeah.
and you get to know them by how they treat this.
That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
The small things mean just as much as the big things.
Yeah.
You know, if I come in here and you had something important, like an important paper, and I were to just like leave my cup on it or something, that would say something about me.
Absolutely.
I'm not aware. I'm not conscious.
Amazing.
Can I read a couple other things?
Yes. Men's History Month, I guess, is Men's History Month.
So this is the same character as when he got older, Nick Adams. This is from a short story called Fathers and Sons. His father has since passed on, and now he's with his son. Now, as he rode along the highway in the car and it was getting dark, Nick was all through thinking about his father. The end of the day never made him think of him. The end of the day had always belonged to Nick alone, and he never felt right unless he was alone at it. His father came back to him in the fall of the year or in the early spring when there had been jacksnipe on the prairie, or when he saw shocks of corn, or when he saw a lake, or if he ever saw a horse and buggy, or when he saw or heard wild geese, or in a duck blind, remembering the time an eagle dropped through the whirling snow to strike a canvas-covered decoy, rising, his wings beating, the talons caught in the canvas. His father was with him suddenly in deserted orchards and in newly plowed fields, in thickets on small hills, or when going through dead grass, whenever splitting wood or hauling water, by grist mills, cider mills, and dams, and always with open fires. The towns he lived in were not towns his father knew.
Amazing. Nice.
Right? You just the rhythm of it, the imagery.
Man, and you make me remember how the so-called intellectuals, how they write today. It doesn't even make sense.
Right.
You don't even want to read it because
Yep.
it has no rhyme or reason at all.
Yep.
Just a bunch of words.
Just
But you're right.
adjectives,
Adjectives.
verbs, and repetition. You know, the flow. The flow of it makes you feel like you're there.
It's amazing how much we lost in our country as a result of the intellectuals
It is.
not keeping the common sense thing going.
Yeah, it's all common sense.
Yeah.
It's all common sense.
Amazing.
Can I do one more thing?
Real fast.
Real fast?
Yeah.
All right. These are some of his more famous short quotes. They're just
Okay.
the sentence.
Okay.
And I want to know what you think of them, if you have any thoughts about them.
All right. Hit me.
Courage is grace under pressure.
Amazing. Absolutely.
Courage is grace under pressure.
100%.
Man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated.
Amazing. Absolutely. Wow.
Good one, right?
He wrote that too?
Oh yeah, these are sentences from some of his novels. So the full context of the
Amazing!
sentence is in the novel.
Amazing.
You know, but all right, one more. The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong in the broken places.
Yes. Hello, Donald Trump. The great white hope. Wow.
You can't get away from yourself by moving from one place to another.
Right on. Amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, especially his short stories, but all of his novels. You know, The Old Man and the Sea is
Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway. Amazing. Thank you, man.
You're welcome.
I totally appreciate that. Men History Month. That's amazing that the enemies of God and of good, which is the same, would put those books as something bad to read.
Oh yeah, yeah. They don't care.
Right.
They have no sense of history or style.
Why? Excuse me, I got to drink some water. Why are they allowed to get away with that today in every area? Well, the white people are afraid, I guess, but in every area of life, they're able to try to erase true and good history.
Because no one's there to defend it. No one's really standing up to tell them they're wrong for doing that. The white people have been convinced that they're guilty of something, and they hate themselves. I guess, you know.
They're afraid.
I guess they're afraid.
What a mess.
But yeah, I mean, you know, an amazing life, and like I said, he set a lot of people, young men, you know, saw his life and said, I want to be like that. You know,
Yeah.
he set the standard for what manhood is
Yeah.
for a lot of young men.
Were you surprised he killed himself?
No.
Like,
No, because well, it's kind of a long story, but late in his life, he was getting he survived many plane crashes. He had several traumatic head injuries.
Oh.
And he was still drinking. He got very paranoid. He was like shaky. He couldn't shoot guns anymore. He couldn't write anymore. He couldn't do any of the things he
I
loved
see.
to do.
And these things happen as a result of their plane crashes and things like that?
Well, he was also paranoid that the FBI was spying on him at the time because he participated in a civil war over in Spain, and the FBI wasn't sure of his loyalties to the country, so that he was like the FBI's tapping my phones, you know, and he was getting paranoid.
Oh, wow.
And he
Nothing new under the sun.
And like I said, he couldn't do all the things he loved to do. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't write. He couldn't do any of that. And that's not, I mean, obviously that's not an excuse. Those aren't the things that
Right.
he defined him. But it turns out the FBI was spying on him.
Really?
They found that out years later. They were tapping his phones.
Amazing.
But yeah, he did. He did end up committing suicide. But
Amazing. Thank you, man.
you're welcome.
Ernest Hemingway. I got to take a quick break. When I come back, your phone calls.